Admiral Krav Nulaar slouched in his command chair, mandibles clicking with annoyance, as yet another report scrolled across his visual cortex implant. 47 stellar cycles of military service had left him with little patience for bureaucratic nonsense. His exoskeleton, once a gleaming cobalt blue, had faded to a dull azure, marked with the honorable scars of 17 major conflicts across the Galactic Hegemony. "Admiral, we've intercepted another transmission from the Sol system," announced Lieutenant Traxmandari, her voice modulator betraying a hint of excitement despite the professional tone she attempted to maintain. "Let me guess," Krav rumbled, "more of their ridiculous television broadcasts. Another episode of beings pretending to survive on remote islands while backstabbing each other for meaningless currency?" The bridge crew chuckled. Monitoring Earth's communications had become something of an entertainment source for the crew of the Inevitability, flagship of the Hegemony's 7th Reconnaissance Fleet. "No, sir," Trax replied, her secondary eyes blinking rapidly. "This appears to be a direct message. Encrypted. Military grade. Nothing like their usual open broadcasts." That got Krav's attention. He straightened in his chair, all four eyes focusing sharply on the main holographic display. "Put it through." The message was brief, just 7 words, but they sent a wave of unease rippling through Krav's nervous system. "You have sealed your fate. We are coming." Trace confirmed. "Admiral," reported Security Officer Dex Pontari from his station. "Definitely originated from their third planet. Specifically from a facility designated Pentagon by the locals." Krav's upper lip curled into what his species considered a smile, but would send most humans running in terror. How quaint. The primates are threatening us now. The Galactic Hegemony had been observing Earth for decades. Humans were classified as a Level 2 civilization barely capable of reaching their own moon, let alone posing any real threat to spacefaring species. Yet something about them had always unsettled the Hegemony's xenobiologists. Their aggression levels, resource consumption, and rate of technological advancement were all marked as concerning anomalies in official reports. "Should we respond, Admiral?" asked Trax. "Absolutely not," Krav snapped. "Directive 7 Alpha is clear observation only. No contact." He paused, mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "Though I admit I'm curious what prompted this unusual transmission." A thought occurred to him. "Check the stealth field generators. Ensure we haven't been detected." "All systems nominal, Admiral," reported Chief Engineer Garv Lassiter, his tentacles dancing across the quantum interface. "We're completely invisible to their primitive scanning technology." Krav nodded, but couldn't shake the growing discomfort in his hindgut. The humans were considered primitive, yes, but dangerous in the way unexploded ordnance was dangerous. Unpredictable. Volatile. And now apparently aware of being watched. "Increase our distance from the Sol system by 2 light minutes," he ordered. "And alert High Command. I want to know what other unusual activity our monitoring stations have picked up from this sector." As the Inevitability gracefully pulled away from Earth's orbital plane, Krav couldn't help but wonder if the Hegemony had underestimated these bizarre bipeds. It wouldn't be the first time a primitive species had surprised the galaxy. And rarely did such surprises end well for anyone involved. Krav's first encounter with humanity wasn't supposed to happen at all. 23 solar cycles ago, the research vessel Empirical Logic had been mapping the unremarkable spiral arm of a backwater galaxy when its long-range sensors detected an unusual radio burst. It was the most ridiculous accident, Krav explained to the newly arrived intelligence officer Mira Vantis during her orientation briefing. The Empirical Logic was actually searching for quantum anomalies near a pulsar when they picked up what they thought was background radiation noise. Mira, fresh from the academy with her carapace still gleaming with youth, leaned forward eagerly. And it was actually Earth's broadcasts. "Exactly," Krav said, pulling up a holographic replay of the original discovery. Captain Jax Peruna was about to filter it out when her communications specialist noticed patterns in the noise. Artificial patterns. The hologram showed primitive black and white images, humans in strange clothing dancing to music with no discernible mathematical structure. They were broadcasting their entertainment directly into space. Can you imagine? Krav laughed, a sound like rocks tumbling down a metal chute. No encryption, no security protocols, just blasting their culture across the cosmos for anyone to intercept. The empirical logic had immediately diverted its mission, approaching the Sol system with stealth protocols engaged. What they found was a biological impossibility, a species that by all normal evolutionary metrics should have destroyed itself centuries ago. Initially, we found them hilarious, Krav continued, queuing up various historical broadcasts. They spent millennia killing each other over imaginary borderlines and invisible deities. Their political systems were laughably inefficient, their resource allocation absurdly wasteful. Images flashed of human wars, commercials for unnecessary products, reality television shows, and political debates. High Command ordered a permanent observation post. We expected to document their inevitable self-annihilation, adding another case study to the hegemony's failed civilizations database. Mira's antennae twitched with curiosity, but they didn't self-destruct. No. Krav's voice dropped an octave. Instead, they kept advancing. Despite everything. Despite constant conflict, environmental disasters, and biological pandemics. They just kept going, kept innovating at a pace that violated several of our established xenosociological models. He pulled up a timeline showing human technological progression, from primitive flight to space exploration in less than a century. From basic computing to rudimentary artificial intelligence in less than 6 decades. That's Mira searched for the word. Alarming, Krav finished for her. We've been monitoring their every transmission since then. Their internet, their telecommunications, their supposedly secure military channels. Krav gestured to the monitoring stations surrounding the bridge, where dozens of analysts were cataloging human communications in real time. For years, we found their persistent survival amusing, like watching a larva navigate a maze designed for adult specimens. But recently he trailed off, mandibles clicking in what Mira recognized as the gesture for deep concern. Their rate of advancement has become exponential, and certain encrypted transmissions suggest they've developed technologies that should be beyond their capabilities. Such as? Mira asked. Such as the ability to detect our presence, Krav replied grimly, which makes their latest transmission all the more troubling. Admiral, you need to see this, Senior Analyst Pax Tormalin called from his monitoring station, breaking the usual hushed atmosphere of the observation deck. Krav moved swiftly across the deck, his heavy frame making barely a sound on the quantum-dampened flooring. The observation deck contained thousands of data streams, all continuously analyzing different aspects of human civilization. What am I looking at, Tormalin? Krav demanded, his secondary eyes narrowing at the data flowing across the screen. Pattern anomalies, sir. We've been tracking their scientific publications for trends, and Pax's voice modulator fluctuated with unease. They're deliberately publishing incorrect information. Krav's exoskeleton ridges flared. Explain. Their quantum physics papers contain subtle errors. Their AI research publications describe systems significantly less advanced than what we're detecting in their classified networks. Their space propulsion theories are laughably primitive compared to the engine signatures we've detected leaving their atmosphere. Krav stared at the evidence, a cold sensation crawling along his spine ridges. They're creating a false scientific facade. Yes, sir. And there's more. Pax switched screens to a global map of Earth. These are their public space programs: NASA, ESA, CNSA, ISRO. But these. He highlighted dozens of unmarked locations, are facilities with no official existence. Massive power consumption, unusual radiation signatures, and complete communications blackouts. Lieutenant Trix joined them, adding, We've also noticed a pattern in their entertainment media, sir. For the past 50 years, humans have produced an increasing number of stories about alien invasions, first contact scenarios, and interstellar warfare. Fiction as psychological preparation, Krav muttered. He'd seen this pattern before. On other worlds, species preparing their populations for major societal shifts often embedded concepts in entertainment first. The most concerning pattern is this: Admiral, Chief Science Officer Nev Blackwood activated the main holographic display. It showed a three-dimensional model of human technological advancement plotted against time. Unlike the smooth curves of most species, the human line jagged erratically upward, with occasional plateaus followed by near vertical leaps. Notice how they sometimes appear to stall technologically, then suddenly advance multiple generations at once. That's not natural development. Reverse engineering, Krav said immediately. But from what? They haven't had contact with any spacefaring species. Nev's facial tentacles writhed anxiously. We don't know, sir. But their apparent disregard for self-preservation is equally troubling. The display shifted to montages of human activities, extreme sports participants leaping from cliffs with minimal safety equipment, test pilots pushing experimental aircraft beyond design parameters, scientists exposing themselves to dangerous conditions to gather data. They embrace risk in a way that's statistically aberrant, Nev continued. The Hegemony Xenopsychology division calls it adaptive recklessness. Most species evolve toward safety and stability. Humans seem to deliberately seek danger, then adapt to overcome it. Like biological stress testing, Krav said thoughtfully. They push themselves to breaking point to identify weaknesses. Precisely, Admiral. And there's one more thing. Nev hesitated, mandibles clicking nervously. Their military exercises have changed. For centuries, they practiced fighting each other. But in the past decade, they've shifted to scenarios involving defense against technologically superior invaders. Security Officer Dex Pontari, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. They're preparing for us, aren't they? Krav felt his blood run cold as realization dawned. Not just preparing, testing. Those UFO sightings their media ridicules? Those weren't our stealth failures. They were deliberate human probes to test our surveillance capabilities. A heavy silence fell over the observation deck as the implications became clear. Admiral, Trike said quietly, if they know we're watching and they're deliberately misleading us about their capabilities, then we have no idea what they're actually capable of, Krav finished grimly. And that makes them the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The grand chamber of the Galactic Hegemony pulsed with tense energy. Representatives from 17 major species and 32 associate civilizations had assembled for what was officially designated an emergency threat assessment conclave. In reality, it was a war council. Admiral Krav Nulaar stood at the central podium, his weathered form illuminated by the chamber's ceremonial lights. Behind him, a massive holographic projection of Earth rotated slowly, seemingly innocent and blue. Distinguished representatives, Krav began, his voice resonating through the chamber. I appear before you today to recommend immediate containment action against the species designate human from the planet Earth, Sol System, Orion Spiral Arm. Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates. Earth was barely on the Hegemony's radar, a level 2 civilization that shouldn't warrant this level of attention. The evidence compiled by the 7th Reconnaissance Fleet suggests humans are engaging in systematic deception regarding their technological capabilities, Krav continued. They appear to be preparing for interstellar conflict while maintaining a facade of primitive development. He projected a series of data points: unusual energy signatures, unexplained satellite deployments, suspicious resource allocations. Based on standard threat matrix analysis, I recommend immediate implementation of Containment Protocol Sigma-9. We must establish a quarantine perimeter around their solar system and neutralize their capacity for interstellar travel before they achieve it. The chamber erupted in voices. Containment Protocol Sigma-9 was just one step below complete planetary sterilization. Admiral Nulaar called out a melodic voice that cut through the chaos. "I request formal opposition time." The chamber fell silent as Dr. Pila Zintrix glided toward the secondary podium, and her translucent body shimmered with the bioluminescent patterns that marked her as one of the Luminari, the hegemony's most respected xenobiologists. "The Admiral's recommendation is premature and based on fear rather than fact," Pila stated, her voice gentle yet firm. "Humans exhibit unusual development patterns, yes, but that does not automatically indicate hostile intent." She projected her own data: human art, music, humanitarian efforts, philosophical writings about peaceful cosmic coexistence. "They are unusual, fascinating even, but not necessarily dangerous," she argued. "Their deception could simply be compartmentalized research, something many of our own species practice. Their rapid advancement could be the result of unique cognitive architecture rather than sinister purpose." Krav's mandibles clicked with irritation. "With respect, Doctor, you haven't seen them as I have. They practice warfare as an art form. Their entire history is written in blood." "Whose history isn't?" Pella countered. "Even the Luminari went through violent phases before achieving harmony. Humans show remarkable capacity for growth and moral evolution." Supreme Counselor Vox Malachi raised his crystalline appendages for silence. "The Council recognizes the gravity of this decision. Admiral, your final statement?" Krav gazed around the chamber, sensing the delegates' hesitation. "Distinguished representatives, I have defended the hegemony for 47 cycles. I recognize an existential threat when I see one. Humans don't just advance, they leap forward through sheer force of will and desperate innovation. If we wait until they achieve interstellar capability, it will be too late. They are not like us. They don't think like us. And that makes them unpredictable." "The unpredictable is not automatically hostile," Pella interjected. "When it comes to the safety of the hegemony," Krav responded grimly, "I cannot afford to gamble on philosophical distinctions." The vote was closer than Krav expected. But in the end, fear won over curiosity by a narrow margin. Containment Protocol Sigma-9 was authorized, and with it, humanity's fate was seemingly sealed. Or so the hegemony believed. Operation Firebreak commenced at 0300 Galactic Standard Time. The hegemony battle fleet, 12 dreadnoughts, 37 cruisers, and over 200 support vessels emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation just beyond Mars orbit. It was the largest military force assembled in the sector in over 3 centuries, overkill for a primitive world that had barely reached its own moon. Admiral Krav Nulaar stood on the command deck of the flagship Inexorable Judgment, his 4 arms crossed behind his back as he surveyed the tactical hologram. Earth hung before him, a blue marble suspended in the blackness, blissfully unaware of its impending doom. "All vessels report ready, Admiral," announced Fleet Commander Joris Talmax, his scale-covered head bowing slightly. "Weapon systems charged. Planetary containment grid prepared for deployment." "Excellent," Krav rumbled. "Begin Phase 1. Across the fleet, massive cannons swiveled toward predetermined targets: military bases, command centers, missile silos, and other strategic assets. The attack had been meticulously planned over 3 standard months, with every human defensive capability cataloged and assigned a priority for neutralization. "Sir," called Communications Officer Lara Nix, her facial quills vibrating with tension. "We're detecting unusual activity in Earth's orbital defense network. They appear to be tracking us." Krav's secondary eyes narrowed. "Impossible. Our stealth systems are engaged. They shouldn't even know we're here yet." "Nevertheless, Admiral," Lara insisted, "their satellites are reorienting toward our position. Several ground-based installations have powered up energy weapons we weren't aware they possessed." A cold sensation crawled along Krav's spine. Launch the first wave immediately. Target their orbital assets and communications infrastructure. Yes, Admiral, Joris responded, relaying the commands through the battle network. The void between the planets lit up as hundreds of energy projectiles streaked toward Earth. Each was designed to deliver a precise, surgical strike, not to cause massive civilian casualties, but to cripple humanity's ability to coordinate a defense or launch counterattacks. The tactical display showed the projectiles approaching Earth's atmosphere when the unexpected happened. Dozens of previously undetected defense satellites activated, projecting energy fields that intercepted nearly half the incoming attacks. What in the void? Joris exclaimed, mandibles clicking rapidly in shock. Those defenses weren't there yesterday. They've been hiding their capabilities, Krav growled, remembering his warnings to the Council. Deploy second wave, full dispersal pattern, and move the fleet into attack formation Delta. The massive ships began to advance toward Earth, their engines glowing with eerie blue light. The second wave of projectiles launched, this time accompanied by thousands of smaller kinetic impactors designed to overwhelm the defensive grid through sheer numbers. On the tactical display, Earth's nations appeared to be responding with surprising coordination. Instead of panicking or launching attacks at each other as the hegemony's psychological models had predicted, they were implementing what looked like a previously rehearsed defense protocol. Multiple launches detected from Earth's surface, reported Sensor Officer Quill Bandari, her voice tight with alarm. Unknown propulsion signature, not matching any known human technology. Krav leaned forward, his exoskeleton creaking. Show me. The main view screen shifted to show dozens, then hundreds of small craft rising from Earth's atmosphere. They weren't the crude chemical rockets humans were known to use, but sleek vessels with propulsion systems that bent space in ways that should be impossible for a Level 2 civilization. They're accelerating toward the fleet, Quill reported, her voice rising. Current velocity exceeds our tactical projections by this can't be right by a factor of 7. Evasive maneuvers. Krav barked. All vessels, defensive protocols. The human vessels split into tactical groups, each targeting a different hegemony ship with precision that spoke of extensive combat training. They moved with impossible agility, somehow anticipating the hegemony's defense patterns. The first casualty came when the cruiser Righteous Cause exploded in a blinding flash of light, struck by weapons that cut through its supposedly impenetrable shields like they weren't even there. Admiral, Joris said, his voice barely audible over the chaos of the command deck, I believe we may have miscalculated. Krav stared at the tactical display as more red indicators blinked out, signifying lost hegemony vessels. The elegant, overwhelming victory he had planned was rapidly devolving into a chaotic bloodbath. This was supposed to be a containment operation, he said quietly. How did they know we were coming? How did they prepare so thoroughly? As if in answer, a transmission cut through the command channel, a human voice, speaking perfect galactic standard. Admiral Nulaar, you should have listened to Dr. Zintrix. The next 37 minutes would later be studied in every military academy across the galactic hegemony, an object lesson in the dangers of underestimating an opponent. How do they know my name? Krav demanded, his voice cutting through the chaos on the command deck. Before anyone could respond, the tactical display erupted with new alerts. Multiple hyperspace signatures detected, shouted Sensor Officer Quill. They're coming from behind us. Krav spun around as the main view screen shifted to show a terrifying sight, a second human fleet emerging from what appeared to be artificially generated wormholes. Not the crude hyperspace jumps used by most civilizations, but precisely calculated tiers in space-time that allowed the human vessels to appear exactly where they wanted to be, directly behind the hegemony's support ships and more vulnerable cruisers. Impossible, whispered Fleet Commander Joris. They can't have mastered targeted wormhole technology. That's at least 3 technological leaps beyond their classification. Evidently, Krav said dryly, our classification was wrong. The human counterattack moved with devastating precision. Their smaller vessels swarmed around the hegemony's larger ships like insects, but each carried weaponry that seemed specifically designed to target weaknesses in alien shielding systems. They didn't attack randomly, but focused on propulsion systems, weapons arrays, and command nodes as if they had detailed schematics of hegemony vessel design. The glorious purpose and sovereign right are reporting critical failures, Communications Officer Lara called out, her voice strained. The unwavering doctrine is gone, Admiral, just gone. What do you mean, gone? Krav demanded. I mean it's not destroyed, it's missing. The humans deployed some kind of spatial displacement weapon. The entire ship just vanished. On the tactical display, the elegant formation of the hegemony fleet had devolved into chaos. Ship markers blinked out one after another. Not all were destroyed, some were disabled, some appeared to be boarded by human strike teams that had somehow bypassed their security systems. Admiral, Strategic Officer Mika Vale reported, the humans are deploying a technology we haven't seen before. Some kind of biomechanical interface drones. They're attaching to our ships and overriding our control systems. Krav pounded his command console with a heavy fist. How are they doing this? How do they know so much about our technology? The answer came in the form of another transmission, this time accompanied by a visual. A human female appeared on the main screen, wearing what appeared to be a military uniform with insignia Krav didn't recognize. Her dark skin contrasted with short silver hair, and her eyes held the steady gaze of someone accustomed to command. Admiral Krav Nulaar, she said, her voice calm and measured. I am Fleet Admiral Tessa Blackwood of the Earth Defense Alliance. I'd like to discuss the terms of your surrender. A stunned silence fell over the command deck. Surrender? Krav finally managed. We are the Galactic Hegemony. We do not surrender to primitives. Admiral Blackwood smiled a cold, predatory expression. Primitives? Is that what you still think we are? Let me educate you, Admiral. We detected your stealth vessels 27 years ago. We've been monitoring your communications, studying your technology, and preparing for this day ever since. Images began to flash on a secondary screen: hegemony ships, bases, even classified technical schematics. While you were watching our public broadcasts and thinking yourself so clever, we were analyzing your quantum communication frequencies. While you were laughing at our primitive space program, we were reverse engineering the technology from your scout ships. The ones you thought crashed accidentally. Krav felt his blood run cold. You deliberately crashed our scouts? Of course, Blackwood replied with a shrug. We needed the technology, and you weren't exactly offering trade agreements. I believe your official policy was to, what was it? Observe the primitives until they inevitably destroy themselves? Another series of explosions rocked the inexorable judgment, and damage reports flooded in from all decks. You have 8 minutes before we target your flagship's main reactor, Blackwood continued matter-of-factly. In that time, you will order your remaining vessels to power down all weapons and propulsion systems. Any ship that fails to comply will be either destroyed or collected for further study. Your choice. On the tactical display, Krav could see the truth. Half his fleet was already gone, destroyed, disabled, or captured. The remainder were scattered, their formation broken, their coordinated defense systems in shambles. The humans had systematically dismantled the most powerful battle group in this sector of the galaxy. How? Krav asked, genuine bewilderment in his voice. How did a supposedly primitive species achieve all this in secret? Admiral Blackwood's expression softened slightly, almost pitying. Because we had to, Admiral. Your hegemony has a policy of containing or eliminating potential rivals before they can challenge you. We couldn't afford to show our true capabilities until we were ready to defend ourselves. You forced our hand. Krav looked around at his command staff, seeing the same realization dawning on all their faces. They had catastrophically underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. 7 minutes, Admiral Nulaar, Blackwood reminded him. Tick-tock. With a heavy sense of defeat, unlike anything in his 47 cycles of service, Krav gave the order to surrender. 3 solar days after the humiliating surrender, Admiral Krav Nulaar found himself in a position he'd never imagined, standing before the human military leadership as a prisoner of war. The room was Spartanly decorated, with only a large table surrounded by chairs and a view screen on one wall. Armed guards stood at the corners, their faces impassive. "You understand the concept of proportional response, Admiral?" asked Fleet Admiral Tessa Blackwood, who sat directly across from him. Her silver hair gleamed under the harsh lighting. "I do," Krav replied stiffly, his pride still raw. "It's a concept we teach at the Academy." "But not one you practice," noted General Marcus Rivera, a stocky human with a scar running down his left cheek. "Your attack was intended to cripple our civilization and contain us permanently within our solar system." Krav saw no point in denial. "Yes, the hegemony deemed your species a potential threat." "Potential," echoed Admiral Blackwood, tapping her fingers on the table. "You attempted genocide based on potential. We were following standard protocols for primitive species that might one day challenge you," interrupted a third human, a rail-thin woman introduced as Director Naomi Parker of Earth Intelligence. "Yes, we know all about Containment Protocol Sigma-9. We've been decoding your archives for quite some time." Krav felt a chill. The hegemony's containment protocols were among its most closely guarded secrets. "What happens now?" Krav asked, mandibles tight with tension. "You've destroyed half our fleet and captured much of the rest. Will you execute me as an example?" Admiral Blackwood looked almost offended. "We're not barbarians, Admiral, despite what your xenopsychologists might believe." She nodded to an aide, who activated the view screen. It showed an image of Earth from orbit, but something was wrong. The continents looked different, shifted somehow. "What am I looking at?" Krav asked, genuinely confused. "Earth, as of 6 hours ago," Blackwood replied. "Or rather, what you thought was Earth." Krav's all 4 eyes widened with shock as understanding dawned. "A decoy?" "A very sophisticated one," Director Parker confirmed with a thin smile, "complete with a fully functioning biosphere and population centers. We built it over the last decade once we understood your intentions. But the billions of life signs, the cities, automated systems, drone populations, and about 7 million actual humans volunteers who maintained the illusion while we evacuated the rest." "Evacuated to where?" Krav whispered, a new dread building in his gut. Admiral Blackwood's expression hardened. "That's not your concern. What is your concern is the message I've been instructed to deliver to you, and through you, to the Galactic Hegemony." She leaned forward, her eyes boring into him. "You will be released with the remainder of your command staff and 3 vessels, just enough to make it back to hegemony space. You will deliver a message from humanity to your leaders." "What message?" Krav asked, though he suspected he already knew. Blackwood's voice was cold as space itself. "The same one we sent before your attack, which you so fatefully ignored. You have sealed your fate. We are coming." The view screen changed again, showing hundreds of wormholes opening throughout what Krav recognized with horror as hegemony space. From each emerged sleek human vessels. "Those aren't real-time images," Parker noted casually. "They're from 18 hours ago." "While you were launching your attack here," Blackwood explained, "our main fleet was deploying throughout your territory. Military installations, governance centers, shipyards, all are now under human control or observation." "Impossible," Krav breathed. "The logistics alone." "We've had decades to prepare, Admiral," Blackwood replied. "Decades of watching you underestimate us." She stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "We're not destroying the hegemony, Admiral Nulaar. We're integrating it. Your council has already been presented with terms. Either way, the galaxy as you know it has changed forever." As Krav was escorted out, the human's words echoed in his mind. "You have sealed your fate. We are coming." He finally understood. It hadn't been a threat. It had been a promise. As the transport vessel carrying Admiral Krav and his surviving command staff departed the Sol system, he spent hours in the observation deck, staring at the stars. The universe he had known his entire life had shattered in the span of a few days. "Admiral, you should see this," called Lieutenant Trix, interrupting his brooding. "We're receiving transmissions from across hegemony space, all on encrypted channels that shouldn't exist." Krav followed her to the communications array, where dozens of signals were being intercepted, all using hegemony military frequencies, but originating from sources not registered in their database. "What am I looking at?" he asked. "Human communications, sir. They're everywhere." Trix's voice trembled slightly, and based on the timestamps and reference codes, they've been there for years. A disturbing thought formed in Krav's mind. "Show me the oldest transmission you can find." Trix worked the controls, searching through the intercepted data. "Here's one from 12 standard years ago. It's between something called Outpost Horizon and Alpha Colony." The message appeared on screen: "Terraform Project Alpha 7 complete. Local species integration proceeding as planned. Request additional agricultural specialists for Phase 2. "They've been terraforming," Krav whispered in disbelief. "Where was this sent from?" Trix checked the coordinates and froze. "Sir, this originated from the Vexian system." "That's impossible. The Vexian system is uninhabitable. It's a radiation-soaked wasteland from the quantum wars." "Apparently not anymore," Trix replied, pulling up more intercepted communications. "There are similar messages from the Kuldari Nebula, the Proxima Drift, even the dead sectors beyond hegemony space." The implications hit Krav like a physical blow. Humans hadn't just been hiding their technology, they'd been expanding throughout the galaxy right under the hegemony's nose, targeting systems that no one would bother to check. Wastelands, radiation zones, supposedly uninhabitable planets. The door hissed open, and a human entered, one Krav recognized as Commander Eli Mason, their military escort. "I see you've discovered our little secret," Mason said without preamble. "Wondering how we managed it?" Krav turned to face him. "You've established colonies throughout our territory for years. How did we not detect them?" Mason smiled. "The same way you didn't detect our true technological level. We're very good at hiding when we need to be." "But why?" Krav demanded. "If you could do all this, build colonies, terraform planets, develop technology beyond even our understanding, why maintain the charade?" "Because we studied your history, Admiral," Mason replied, his tone serious now. "The hegemony has a pattern. Any species that advances too quickly gets contained or eliminated. We needed time to prepare properly." "These colonies," Krav said slowly, "they were a contingency plan." "Exactly. A distributed civilization can't be easily destroyed. If you had attacked the real Earth and somehow succeeded, humanity would have survived." Mason leaned against the bulkhead. "We didn't want a conflict. We were content to develop quietly while you all went about your business." "Then why reveal yourselves now?" Mason's expression hardened. "Because you forced our hand. Your attack activated protocols we hoped we'd never need to use. Every human colony, outpost, and infiltration unit just switched from observe and avoid to secure and control." He gestured to the communications display where hundreds of signals now flashed, each representing a human presence that had remained hidden until now. "The irony, Admiral, is that your attempt to contain us is exactly what forced us to take over. If you had just let us be, we might have peacefully integrated into the galactic community over the next century. Krav stared at the display, finally comprehending the full scale of humanity's presence. They weren't just on a few planets, they were everywhere, woven into the very fabric of the galaxy. "We didn't want an empire," Mason said quietly. "Your hegemony forced us to build one in secret." The inexorable judgment limped through hyperspace toward Hegemony Prime, carrying what remained of Admiral Krav Nulaar's once proud fleet. The journey that should have taken 3 days had stretched to 9 as they nursed damaged engines and failing life support systems. Krav had spent most of that time in his private quarters, reviewing everything: the surveillance logs of Earth, the battle recordings, and most disturbingly, the data packet Commander Mason had provided before their departure. It contained centuries of human history that the hegemony had never seen, carefully hidden from alien observers. As the ship prepared to exit hyperspace, Krav summoned his remaining senior officers to the strategy room. Their faces showed the same haunted expression he felt in his own soul. "We arrive at Hegemony Prime in 2 hours," he began without preamble. "Before we do, you need to understand what we're returning to." He activated the holographic display, showing the current state of hegemony space based on the transmissions they'd intercepted. Nearly every major system now showed human presence. "I've spent days analyzing their history, their psychology, everything we know about them," Krav continued. "And I finally understood our fundamental error." Fleet Commander Joris looked up wearily. "What error, sir?" "We believed humans were showing their true nature in their entertainment, their wars, their chaotic politics," Krav explained. "We thought we were watching their real civilization evolve. But we weren't." He brought up images from the data packet: massive underground cities, advanced research facilities hidden beneath oceans, entire populations living in hollowed-out asteroids. "They created a surface civilization for us to watch, a distraction. A carefully constructed facade that played to our expectations of a primitive, warlike species that would likely destroy itself. They wanted us to underestimate them." Lieutenant Trex's mandibles clicked softly. "But why go to such lengths? Why not just hide their technology?" "Because they needed time," Krav said grimly. "And time to spread throughout the galaxy. Time to study us. Time to prepare." He pulled up one final image, a historical document from human archives dated nearly 2 centuries earlier. It outlined something called the Diaspora Initiative, a multi-generational plan to ensure human survival by establishing colonies across thousands of worlds. "They knew, somehow, that they weren't alone in the universe," Krav continued. "And they suspected that first contact might not be peaceful. So they prepared accordingly, hiding their true nature and capabilities until they were ready." Security Officer Dex, who had barely spoken since their defeat, finally broke his silence. "And our attack was the trigger." "Yes," Krav nodded heavily. "We didn't just lose a battle. We unleashed something far worse. The humans were content to expand slowly, to integrate gradually. But now they're coming for revenge," Joris finished. Krav shook his head. "No, that's what we would do. That's what the hegemony has always done. Humans are different." He pulled up Admiral Blackwood's final message to him. "They're not coming for revenge. They're coming to ensure their survival by any means necessary. They now see the hegemony as an existential threat that must be neutralized. And based on what we've seen of their capabilities, they'll succeed." The ship's automated voice announced their imminent arrival at Hegemony Prime. As his officers prepared to disembark, Krav remained for a moment, staring at the tactical display that showed human vessels already in orbit around their homeworld. He finally understood the true meaning of Earth's final transmission. "You have sealed your fate" wasn't a defiant last stand, it was a statement of cause and effect. By attacking Earth, the hegemony had sealed not just their own fate, but the fate of the entire galaxy. Humans weren't coming to destroy. They were coming to take control, to remake the galactic order. And they would succeed because they had mastered the one strategy the hegemony had never anticipated: patience. "We have indeed sealed our fate," Krav murmured to himself as he left the strategy room for the last time. "And they have been coming for much longer than we ever realized."